So I just got done epoxy resining this box lid. I used West epoxy system. I find that tends to have less bubbles for the most part. I was worried that the epoxy would cause the little pieces of wood to float, but because I packed them in there so tightly and I poured really slowly, I didn't really have any issues there. I am a little concerned that the color of the wood has changed, especially the Purple Heart has now gotten much darker. It's kind of cool though, I guess it looks more like ebony. Because the box top is glossy already, I want to match it, so I use 1 part clear shellac to 1 part mineral spirit. So I made a design decision not to try to get all the little pieces of end grain level. I thought it was cool to have kind of a topography there, but it makes it sanding impossible, and as you'll see later, it catches my buffing wheel a lot too. So not sure if that was the right choice. An old t-shirt is great to rub on the finish in thin coats. You can angle the piece towards the light to make sure it's a nice smooth coat, no excess. Shellac, especially shellac cut with mineral spirits, dries super fast. That's why I love it. You can put on 3 thin coats very quickly. Alright, it's finally time to start working on the box bottom here. Marking out my finger joints here. I want my height to be the exact height of the wood. A good way to test this is to run a ruler across the top to see if it touches the bit. A good way to zero out your router fence is to slowly move the metal ruler across the opening. Once the ruler doesn't contact the bit anymore, you're there. Now that I've found 0, I just have to move this slide ruler over to match. This is an Incra LS positioner fence. I really love this thing. It has a lead screw that lets you make micro adjustments for a crazy amount of accuracy. I'm using sacrificial wood on the front and the back of my stock to prevent blowout. Just give those sacrificial pieces a haircut and they can be used again. I'm cutting a dado to accept the bottom of the box. Instead of using a table saw, I'm using an up spiral router bit because it will not be a through cut. To make this work, I set up 2 stop blocks on each side of the router fence. Then I drop the wood down over the spinning bit. Per usual, I screw up. I accidentally put one of the dados on the wrong edge of the board. The way I see it, mistakes are just design opportunities. I had intended to use a rabbiting bit with a ball bearing, but I needed to make a 3/16 inch cut, and it turns out I didn't have one that made that depth. So instead, I extended the dado all the way up to the edge of the box. The lid will be more deeply inset than previously planned, but it looks good despite that. The corners of my box lid were still catching, but the wood here was too delicate to use a chisel on. So instead I got my Dremel with a tiny up spiral router bit to trim back the wood. Mistake number 2. I had to cut out the corners of the box bottom to get it to fit inside the dados, but I cut too much back. Another design opportunity presents itself. I decide to use finish before gluing up the box. The only reason I think this might be a bad idea is that the glue doesn't bond as well with shellac. I'm not too worried. I have some pretty good joinery here, and this isn't a piece of furniture after all. I think it's going to be just fine. On the plus side, any squeeze out will be less likely to absorb into the wood. As I mentioned earlier, the cloth buff would get stuck in the pieces of end grain and even in some of my wood seams. I guess you should really only use perfectly smooth pieces with no place for the cloth to catch. I'm using the bealls buffing system. It consists of 3 different buffs: Tripoli, diamond paste, and carnauba wax. For some reason, when I see the word carnauba, I want to call it carnauba. Carnauba. That's it. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, hit that subscribe button. I also just opened up an Etsy shop. Find the link in the comments.